The storm persisted as Lucasia climbed aboard the pinnace. Peregrina and four stout... Earlier this week, Apple released an in-universe excerpt from Carol's Winds of Wycaro romantasy series that the main character of Pluribus was writing and reading to the fans in episode 1. This excerpt is only available on Apple Books right now. I really love how Apple is utilizing their ecosystem here. And if you've been on my channel before, you know that I love these ARG or alternate reality game experiences that shows sometimes invite us superfans and us, theory crafters who really like to dive deep into the lore of things into. Severance has this a little bit with the macro data refinement game being available online for anyone to play. They also have released little letters and handy books that Severance fans can read to gain a little bit of more insight into the world of Severance and to really feel immersed in that universe. I've also talked about Mr. Robot and how they actually won awards for their ARG experience, which wasn't just letters and excerpts, but they actually created a real world pseudo cryptocurrency that you would rack up points for by completing these real world alternate universe tasks, such as attending Comic-Con and scanning a particular QR code, or visiting a URL that was briefly displayed in an episode, and so on and so forth. I myself was able to actually purchase a Mr. Robot hoodie that I cherish to this day from racking up those points back in 2016 or 2015. Apple Books is only available on iOS devices, so you won't be able to read this on your computer if it's not a Mac. You'll have to have an iPhone or a Mac or something of that sort. So for you guys here today, I was able to manually copy over the text and the images onto my computer, and that is what you're going to see here today for you in the event that you don't have an iOS device. But if you do, I strongly recommend you go on Apple Books, add this to your library to show Apple that we really appreciate this type of thing and this level of engagement with the fan base. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to read the entire thing that they've given us earlier this week. I'm not going to stop for discussion as I'm reading it. I'm just going to go through it. And then after I've read it all, then we will go back and discuss. So I want you guys to pay very close attention to what I'm about to read and what you're about to read and hear, and really think about how this could relate to the lore of Pluribus, what little nuggets of foreshadowing or Easter eggs they might be giving us at this moment, how this could relate to perhaps the ending of Pluribus and the messages being told, and so on and so forth. The cover of this in-universe book here says exclusive excerpt, from best-selling author Carol Sturka. The book title is Bloodsong of Wycaro from the Winds of Wycaro novel. Now, the cover here, there's a little Apple TV sticker up there in the right. And then on the cover, we have the main character here. She is on a ship with Raban's jacket wrapped around her as she is looking outward. She has a gun on her hip, red hair, fair skin, and that is about it for the cover. From the publisher, ahoy lucky readers, the winds of Wycaro blow once again. Best-selling author Carol Sturka gifts readers an exclusive excerpt from the newly released 4th book in her epic rum fantasy trilogy. This book contains a full chapter of the novel Bloodsong of Wycaro, along with a special letter from Carol. Take sail with Lucasia, captain of the dune ship Mercator, as she traverses the amaranthine sands of Wycaro, seeking a cure for the insidious illness felling her crew. As Lucasia navigates the treacherous storm, she is haunted by memories of Raban, the rogue who stole her heart before walking the plank. Seething with passions which cry for a release, she soon learns that the only thing worse than finding yourself alone in the dark is discovering you're not alone. This exclusive excerpt is available for free and only on Apple Books. Also, watch Pluribus now, streaming on Apple TV. You'll catch Carol there too. A letter from the author. Avast Wycarians, Carol here, finishing up the final leg of my Bloodsong of Wycaro tour. It's been a blast, and I thank you all. However, I've noticed there's one thing you're dying to know. From Dallas to Detroit to Des Moines, the same question follows me. It's not, Carol, you pepper in a lot of references to Greek mythology. What is your favorite myth and why? I'm partial to the tale of Sisyphus. I know many of you are fellow writers, so I think no explanation is necessary. No, instead, many of you seem upset, nay, distraught, nay, outraged by one particular detail regarding Bloodsong. Raban is not on the cover. He's never not been on the cover. The Rabasia shipper community is in an uproar. Some of you say you won't even buy the book due to Raban's absence. You guys, you must read the book. Listen, I feel your pain, but the last time we saw Raban in Storm Shadow, he had been ordered by Lucasia to walk the plank, which is certainly an experience not many people survive. Given that tragic fact, would it even make sense for him to be on the cover? Bloodsong is a treatise on heartbreak and grief. You know I am on record for despising spoilers in any form, that my preference to be let events unfold in their own time through Lucasia's anguished eyes. But I also understand that's not everyone's preference. Different strokes for different folks. How hellish would the world be if we all thought exactly the same? Both my manager and agent think I have lost my mind, but I'm going to do something that is antithetical to capitalism. Give my work away for free. A bit of it, anyway. I say this with love. I am honestly getting a bit exhausted by the cyclocane of emotion. Some people like to eat their dessert first, I guess. If you're one of them, the following sneak peek is for you. But if you're a true purple, a Wycarian through and through, then hopefully you've already bought a copy of the book and are reading it front to back, the way Aurora intended. Chapter 16, The Isle of Sinanites. Will it have the same impact on its own as it would had you read the previous 213 pages of Bloodsong? Certainly not. But if you insist on beginning your hot fudge sundae, who am I to stop you? Keep the winds at your back. And then the author's note ends with a signature from Carol Sturka herself. And now we are on to the chapter text. Some of the words in this chapter and names are hard to pronounce, so forgive me if I mispronounce them. Chapter 16, The Isle of Sinanites. Lucasia knew she would not slumber tonight. The angry moon's burn creeping up on her forearms and her hands were excruciating. To think, scant seconds after the emerald light of the twin moons had brought this wrath upon her. Before the sickness, she was able to bask freely in the radiant glow of the moons, resplendent in their luminosity. Now, she could not go on deck unprotected for even an instant. None of her crew could. Beneath her cracked and scarlet skin, her every nerve was on fire. Each spark of pain was so fierce that waves of nausea overcame her, much like the purple waves she could hear portside slapping against the Mercator. She lurched from her bed to the cupboard. Aurora willing, there would be a bucket, a boot, anything to keep the floor of her captain's quarters unsullied. She rummaged desperately, digging out an old pail. Without a moment to spare, she retched. Eventually, this harsh action brought respite. As Lucasia composed herself, a glimmer caught her eye. In the back of the cabinet, Hidden behind the fernway powder and brinum leaves was a glass jar, half full of a deep blue ointment. She tenderly unscrewed the top. The thick, fruity scent of macerated berries wafted through the air. The aroma immediately brought her back. The day after the terrible battle of Nepenthe, she woke in a haze to Raban undressing the bandage on her shoulder. "What are you doing?" From his pocket, he withdrew a small jar, presenting its cobalt-colored contents. "This, ma chérie, is a salve from Wandive berry. It will soothe your wounds." Raban rubbed the salve between his rough hands, warming it. The sweet, jammy smell drifted languidly around the cabin, calming Lucasia with memories of childhood, before her life had become so unwieldy, so raw. He placed his slippery hands on her shoulder. "Hell's alarm, it stings," she exclaimed. "For things to heal, they must first hurt, ma chérie." Lucasia dipped her fingers into the jar and scooped a dollop of the ointment onto her moonsburn. The cooling salve immediately stung, a prickle of knives that was almost unbearable. It began to melt, a deep blue against the rash red of the burn. She rubbed it into her skin, ignoring the pain, willing herself to continue as Raban had, as if she could somehow bring him back by repeating his actions. The Waldenive tingled as it spread its healing properties. If only there was a salve for a broken heart. Suddenly, there came a knock at the door, ripping Lucasia from the sweet embrace of the past. "Who goes there?" she roared. "O Riordan, my captain," responded a voice as weathered as the sand-grooved figurehead at the Mercator's bow. Granted entrance, the burly deckhand stepped through the doorway shrouded in sailcloth, not a single pouce of skin exposed to the moonlight. He unwrapped the heavy fabric covering his head, revealing a ruggedly handsome face with eyes as green as the twin moons. Had illness not befallen the crew, and Lucasia not been so affected by Moonsburn, she might have taken temporary harbor in his strong arms. "Captain Peregrina requests your absence in the chart room." "Aye, what seems to be the problem?" "The storm troubles her, Captain." As if to emphasize Peregrina's concern, the ship listed as a dune swell struck its side. Lucasia couldn't ignore her trusty navigator's apprehension. Dismissing O'Riordan, she moved to her bed on which Raban's topcoat was strewn. She picked it up and buried her face in the folds of fabric, searching for his scent. There was barely any left. She draped the coat over her torrent of crimson hair, a makeshift shield against the pale, murderous light of the twin moons. Thus protected, she ventured from her quarters. "This is madness, Captain," was the greeting Lucasia received as she entered the forecastle. Lucasia smirked at Peregrina as she doffed her topcoat. Her old friend was as frank as she was faithful. "Stand fast, navigator. We have suffered tempests before. We cannot make the Isle of Sanities. Over half our crew have taken to their bunks. Trouble enough if this were merely a squall. But now a cyclocane is inbound from the Gulf of all size, accruing speed and strength by the minute. We must first find refuge at the nearest port." Lucasia eyed Peregrina. She looked worse for wear. Bags sagged beneath the tired navigator's eyes. A half-emptied glass sat beside a sextant in azimuth, violetine liquor rocking back and forth within it. "Peregrina," Lucasia calmly began, "I know there is a storm bearing down on us. I know the crew is sick, exhausted, and afraid." Lucasia eased closer to the oaken table. Peregrina stared down at her charts in silent desperation as sand pounded against the portholes. "I also know that medical miracles abound on Senantes. There is no other port for us." Peregrina laughed, a scared yet cruel laugh. "Oh, Lucasia, you can't seriously believe those tales told by willy beggars." Lucasia focused her steely gaze on the navigator. Peregrina averted her eyes, ashamed of her overreach. "I must believe them, Perry. I've heard them tell of a healer banished to the isle. Her name is Madame Asclepius." At that, Peregrina snorted. Lucasia took a purposeful step toward her. "She is our crew's only hope. We will risk the storm or perish trying, as we no doubt will perish without her help." Peregrina opened her mouth to object. Lucasia sternly cut her off. "This is an order from your captain." Topside, Lucasia watched her diminished crew struggle to batten down the hatches. Gouts of amaranthine sand swept across the timbers. Gusts bellowed, knocking the usually resilient deckhands off their feet. The slip sand battered them so hard it threatened to tear holes through the sailcloth envelopes of their bodies. With all her strength, Lucasia held tight to the railing, lest she be blown away like a dry leaf by the cyclocanic gale. "Avast, keep eye of your sailcloths," she shouted to her crew. The clouds were heavy with rain. Now and again, a thin beam of moonlight would peek through, as if it were a baleful green weed sprouting between cobblestones. Lucasia fought her way across the deck, but no storm could ever be a match for her resolve. Through the ache of her heart, the fire of the moon's burn, and the sting of the slip hand, she climbed the steps and took her rightful place at the helm of the Mercator. It was only a few capricious hours later that the master of the watch spotted land, though for the crew it had felt like days. The storm persisted as Lucasia climbed aboard the pinnace. Peregrina and 4 stout Matelots manned the block and tackle. "I'm sorry we couldn't get closer, Captain," Peregrina shouted over the wind. "The slip sand is too rough to anchor near shore. There may be jagged rocks within sands. When should we expect your return?" Lucasia drew Raban's topcoat tighter around her. Despite her practical nature, Lucasia found herself secretly wishing it might somehow imbue her with his strength. "When I have obtained a cure, and only then." Peregrina and the men lowered the pinnace into the raging dune surf. Before the storm could take the wee launch and tear it asunder, Lucasia began to row for shore. She rowed until her hands blistered and ached. She dared not stop for the fear of the cycloclane would whip her away in its whirling tempest. At long last, the pinnace hit land. Lucasia slipped onto the isle and moored the tender to large stone. She trudged along the inky landscape of Sinantes. She could barely make out the island's form through the dense, airborne sand. Each step was a battle. Could she even trust she had made it to the hollow isle? Was her mind as well as her body falling to the curse? The wind blew so fiercely that her footsteps disappeared even as she lifted her boots from the thirsty grasp of the earth. Lucasia had been walking for leagues, yet there was nary a soul to be found. Her mind went to dark places she'd previously refused countenance. Was this healer a story told by desperate pirates seeking an imaginary penance? Beneath her feet, the terrain began to change from moors caked with violent sand to sharp volcanic rock. She carefully traversed the craggy landscape. Should she fall now in the middle of nowhere, she would certainly not be found, which would spell death not only for her, but the entire crew of the Mercator. Despite the difficulty, despite the danger, she had to trek on, if not for herself, then for the men and women who placed their trust in her. She was their captain and would not fail them. Now, in the flickering distance, at the foot of what appeared to be a dark mountain, Lucasia spied a darker smudge, a mirage, perchance. She forced herself forward, setting her sights on it. No, it was a cavern. She entered and collapsed, unable to will her body forward. She rested against the cool wall of the cave, catching her breath. A reedy voice emanated from the gloom. "What foolhardy soul braves this foul tempest in search of my secrets?" Lucasia breathed a sigh of relief. She had found Madame Asclepius. The healer towered over Lucasia. She cut a tall, imposing figure. Vials dangled from the necklaces adorning her protruding collarbones. Her wild hair was pulled back into a knot. A kerchief, a woven goldsbane holding her strays. Lucasia looked up at her in astonishment. "You exist." The striking healer nodded. "Aye, that I do. Though I can barely say the same of you." Lucasia slowly pushed herself upright, bracing against the cavern wall behind her. Her legs trembled with weakness, as if she were balancing on two myophene stalks. Madame Asclepius observed her, sizing up her shaking limbs, fatigued eyes, and fiery hands. She searched within her necklace, opening and smelling the different vials. "Yes, this one," she said, handing Lucasia a vial of smoking liquid. "Drink it." Lucasia downed the elixir in one gulp. Within moments, her legs strengthened, and she could stand without effort. Madame Asclepius arched a razor-thin eyebrow. "Better?" Lucasia nodded with gratitude. She handed the empty vial back to the healer, who pocketed it. "That's all I can do for you." With that, Madame Asclepius turned her back, striding into the Stygian depths of the cave as Lucasia stumbled after her. "You don't understand. I need your help. A curse has befallen my ship. My crew lies paralyzed in their hammocks. They are haunted by visions of death and destruction. We cannot venture into the light of the twin moons, lest our skin burn and boil. It is driving my men mad. We have already lost 4 lives. Sorry, you should have gotten here yesterday. Tonight, I have a patient to whom I must attend." Madame Asclepius kept a brisk pace to the far end of the cavern, which was lit by a candlelight. In a corner, Lucasia could make out a bed. It was occupied. "I will pay any price. I will take you anywhere you wish to go. The Mercator is a strong ship. Once my crew is cured, the sands of Wycaro will be yours to traverse." Madame Asclepius's weathered face was unmoved. She gestured at her bedridden patient. "This man washed up in the cyclocane that has been stalking our isle. Your ills pale in comparison to his." Lucasia felt a pull at her sleeve. She whipped around, indignant. "Unhand me." From within the flickering shadows, the voice of Madame Asclepius's patient echoed softly. "I had a coat like this once." Recognition dawned in Lucasia's eyes. She would know that voice anywhere, as smooth as a wild bourbon and deep as the Reborian trench. Lucasia lifted a candle from the cold cavern floor. It couldn't be, yet somehow it was. "Raban!" She gasped, afraid she might wake herself from this dream of dreams. He was curled on the low cot, shivering. His sweating form was covered in thick, rubbery blankets of mastrous skin. It was not hard for her to imagine the body beneath the covers. She knew every inch of him. Despite his weakened state, Lucasia could not help but notice he was still the devastatingly handsome corsair who had possessed her heart. His wind-swept locks were perfectly tousled, begging for Lucasia to reach out and brush them back from his forehead, hot with fever. She stared at her rogue, words catching in her throat. Could this really be happening? The last time she laid eyes on him was when he had gifted her his topcoat. Then he walked the plank. Oh, damnable duty. Why must it always come between them? His insouciance had forced her hand. By not heeding her many warnings, he had left her no choice but to order his execution. Rank is lonely, its demands relentless. She had been too proud to change her mind. Even now, she couldn't let him know how much she cared for him, how her body ached for his touch. Her cascading emotions coalesced into a single crystalline feeling, one she hadn't allowed herself these many months, one she had thought she had learned to live without. Finally, her heart filled with hope. "Raban, is that really you?" Her voice was hoarse with need. Beside Lucasia, Madame Asclepius looked from one patient to the other with growing curiosity. But Raban merely frowned. When her lover finally spoke, his words pierced Lucasia's battered heart. I'm sorry, madame. Have you mistaken me for someone you know? And that marks the end of the full chapter of Bloodsong of Wycaro, chapter 16. The next piece was a little note from Carol about the author. Carol Sturka is a best-selling creator of the epic fantasy series Winds of Wycaro. Her books have received multiple honors, including the Mars and Eros Reader's Choice Awards. Sturka's work has been translated into more than 24 languages and has earned her devoted fans across the globe. She lives and works in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then here's a picture of Carol.